September 19th, 1948. 8:47 p.m. Wells Restaurant, 135th and Lenox Avenue, Harlem. The night smells like rain that hasn't fallen yet. The air is thick, electric, like the city knows something's about to break. Inside Wells Restaurant, Lucky Strike and Pall Mall smoke drifts toward the ceiling in spirals that look like ghosts dancing to Dizzy Gillespie's Manteca. The jukebox, a Wurlitzer Model 1015, glows in the corner with multicolored neon lights. 40 people pack the place. Red leather booths worn smooth by thousands of conversations. Red and white checkered tablecloths stained with tomato sauce and chicken grease. The smell of collard greens, sweet potatoes, and cornbread mixes with cheap perfume and honest sweat of a Friday night in Harlem. Then the door opens. Sal Bonano crosses the threshold like he owns the place. 6'2", 230 pounds of pure Neapolitan muscle wrapped in a $500 pearl gray suit, black silk tie, gold pinky ring with the initials SB engraved, hair slicked back so tight it catches the light. Behind him come 6 men. Same haircut, same jackets bulging with the guns underneath. They're not trying to hide it. The bulges are obvious, obscene. That's the point. Fear is the first message. Violence is the second. And Sal Bonano is used to both messages working. The restaurant freezes. Not a metaphor, literally freezes. People stop chewing mid-bite. Forks hang suspended in air. Laughter dies in throats that suddenly feel too dry. Cigarette smoke stops moving like the air itself quit circulating. Even the jukebox seems to lower its volume. Manteca keeps playing, but now it sounds distant, like it's coming from another dimension. Background music in a nightmare. Sal moves forward. His Italian leather shoes make a distinctive sound against the worn linoleum floor. Click, click, click. Each step is a statement. Each step says, I can kill you, and nobody will do a damn thing. He heads straight for the corner booth. The only booth in Wells Restaurant with a direct view of both doors and the kitchen. Basic strategy. Never sit where you can't see who's coming. At that booth, a man cuts a ribeye with the precision of a surgeon performing open-heart surgery. Bumpy Johnson, 51 years old, 5'9", navy blue suit pressed to perfection, starched white shirt, wine-colored tie. Not a single wrinkle in his clothes, not a single hair out of place. The knife in his right hand descends toward the meat in measured movements. The sound of steel on porcelain is soft, rhythmic, almost hypnotic. Cut, chew, repeat, methodical, controlled, no wasted motion, like everything Bumpy Johnson does. Across from him sits Mamie Johnson, his wife. 42 years of pure elegance wrapped in an emerald dress that probably cost more than anyone else's monthly salary in that restaurant. Pearl necklace, small diamond earrings, but real ones. The kind of woman who can silence an entire room just by walking through it. She's not eating. She's watching, always watching. Mamie Johnson's eyes miss nothing. Sal reaches the table, doesn't ask permission to speak, doesn't wait for an invitation. He plants himself there like it's his natural right to occupy that space. He smiles, not a friendly smile. It's the smile of a predator who's already decided your dinner. The smile of someone who's won every confrontation in his life through intimidation and brute violence. Bumpy Johnson, Sal says. His voice fills the restaurant. Everyone can hear him. That's also the point. We need to talk. Bumpy doesn't look up. The knife continues its dance against the porcelain. The sound is almost musical. Scrape, cut, scrape. I'm eating, Bumpy says. His voice is low, almost a murmur. but somehow it reaches every corner of the restaurant with more clarity than Sal's shout. Sal laughs. Yeah, I can see that. Nice place you got here, Bumpy. Real quaint. Very authentic. But here's the thing. My Uncle Joe Bonano, he thinks it's time Harlem got with the program. The numbers game, that's Italian business now. Always should have been. Bumpy's knife pauses, just for half a second, then continues cutting. Mamie, however, raises her gaze to Sal. It's a look that could freeze hell itself. Sal continues, fed by his own voice, by the captive audience, by the power he thinks he has. So here's the deal. You step aside, hand over your operation. We'll give you 10% of the take. Honest 10%, Bumpy. Not bad for someone in your position. You can keep this restaurant. Keep being the big man to your people. Play king in your little kingdom. But the real money, the real power, that stays where it belongs. With us. The entire restaurant is holding its breath. 40 pairs of lungs refuse to exhale. The silence is so thick you can feel it pressing against your skin like water 10 feet deep. Bumpy finally places the knife on the table, takes his napkin, white as snow, folded in a perfect triangle, wipes the corners of his mouth with delicate movements, precise, then folds the napkin and places it next to his plate. Every action is deliberate. Every gesture has purpose. Finally, he looks up. Bumpy Johnson's eyes are dark brown, almost black, and right now they're completely calm. It's an unnatural calm. The calm you see in the eye of a hurricane right before the storm tears you apart. That's a very generous offer, Sal, Bumpy says. His voice maintains that low, almost conversational tone. But I'm afraid I'm going to have to decline. Sal's smile wavers. Just a little. But it wavers. You're making a mistake, Bumpy. A big mistake. Bumpy nods gently. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, Sal. Ask anyone. But this ain't one of them. And that's when it happens. The moment that will split the night into before and after. The moment Sal Bonano will remember every single day for the rest of his short life. Sal leans forward. His eyes narrow. His voice drops an octave. And he says the word. That word. The slur that no white man ever says to a black man on his own turf, in front of his wife, in front of his community. Listen, no. Sal Bonano says. The fork Mamie was holding falls from her fingers. It hits the white porcelain plate with a sound that cuts through the restaurant like a .45 caliber gunshot. Clang. The sound echoes, multiplies, fills every empty space, and then silence. But not just any silence. The kind of silence that exists at the bottom of the ocean. The kind of silence that fills a grave. The absolute silence of 40 people who simultaneously realize they've just witnessed something that can't be undone. Bumpy Johnson's expression doesn't change. He doesn't frown, doesn't clench his jaw, doesn't ball his fists. His face remains exactly the same. But everyone in Wells Restaurant who knows Bumpy Johnson, everyone who understands who this man really is, feels the temperature in the room drop 10 degrees in 1 second. Because Bumpy Johnson, sitting perfectly still, hands relaxed on the table, breathing slow and controlled, is infinitely more dangerous than any man screaming with a gun in his hand. And what Bumpy Johnson does next won't just change that night. It will change the entire structure of criminal power in New York City for the next 2 decades. To understand why that moment was so devastating, you need to go back. You need to understand what Harlem was in 1948 and how Bumpy Johnson became its undisputed king. Harlem in 1948 wasn't the Harlem you see in Hollywood movies. It wasn't just a neighborhood. It was a complete world. 200,000 black souls compressed into 135 blocks. People who'd escaped the South during the Great Migration, looking for freedom, and found a different kind of cage. People who worked 16-hour days in kitchens, laundromats, factories, only to return to unheated apartments where 5 families shared one bathroom. But it was their territory, their kingdom. And in that kingdom, Bumpy Johnson wasn't simply the king. He was its architect, its protector, its living code of honor. Bumpy didn't rule from underground bunkers or secret offices with bodyguards outside. He ruled from Wells Restaurant on 135th and Lenox Avenue, a modest place. Red leather booths that had seen better days. Red and white checkered tablecloths washed so many times the pattern had almost disappeared. The perpetual smell of fried chicken, collard greens, baked sweet potatoes, and cornbread floated in the air like incense in a church. It was sacred ground not because of its appearance, but because of what it represented. Because through those doors walked everything that mattered in Harlem. Billie Holiday would come in after singing at the Cotton Club. Duke Ellington would order ribs before rehearsing at the Apollo. Reverend Adam Clayton Powell Jr. held political meetings in the back booth. Numbers runners made their daily reports. Cops from the 32nd Precinct ate for free and looked the other way. Even NAACP members, who publicly condemned organized crime, privately consulted with Bumpy on community matters. And the rule was simple. You could have problems with someone on the street. You could have debts. You could have mortal enemies. But inside Wells Restaurant, you respected the peace. Bumpy's peace. Because breaking that peace wasn't just insulting one man, it was insulting all of Harlem. Why did Bumpy have that power? Why did the Italian mafia, the Irish gangs, the corrupt police all respect him even though they hated him? The numbers. The game that moved the financial heart of Harlem. It's simple on paper. You bet pennies, nickels, dimes on a 3-digit number. If your number hits, you win. The payout was 600 to 1. Bet a penny, win $6. Bet a dollar, win 600. For the people of Harlem, that wasn't gambling. It was hope condensed into numbers. The difference between new shoes for your kid or sending them barefoot to school in winter. The difference between paying rent or ending up on the street. And every week, millions of those small bets turned into thousands of dollars in profit. Control the numbers in Harlem, you controlled the cash flow of an entire community. Bumpy didn't invent the numbers game. A brilliant black woman named Stephanie St. Clair did. Madame Queen, they called her. She ran Harlem's numbers in the 20s and early 30s until Dutch Schultz and the Italian mob tried to muscle in. They nearly destroyed her. That's when she went to Bumpy in 1932 with a simple but lethal proposition. Protect my operation and I'll make you the most powerful man in Harlem. Bumpy kept his word. By 1948, he controlled the entire numbers operation in Harlem, when millions of dollars flowed through his hands every year. And the Italians hated it, because in their world, black men didn't build empires, they worked in them. Frank Costello tried to negotiate. Bumpy refused. Vito Genovese sent threats. Bumpy ignored them. Joe Bonano, boss of one of New York's 5 most powerful families, decided the Harlem problem needed a more direct solution. He sent his nephew, Sal the Butcher Bonano. They called him that for what he did to a guy in Brooklyn who tried to skim money from a Bonano card game. They found pieces of him in 4 different boroughs. Sal had a reputation that preceded every room he entered. 17 dead men in his career. Broken bones. Burned businesses. Millions extorted. He didn't know fear, or at least he thought he didn't until the night of September 19th, 1948. When Sal walked through that door with 6 armed men, every person in Wells' restaurant felt the shift in atmosphere. Like when the pressure drops before a storm. Sal didn't ask permission to approach Bumpy's table, didn't wait for an invitation. Walked straight up to him with that arrogance only men get when they're used to everyone getting out of their way. Bumpy kept cutting his steak, slow, precise. The knife scraped soft against the plate. Didn't even look up when Sal said they needed to talk. "I'm eating," Bumpy replied in that low voice. Sal smiled. That smile we already know. The bully's smile. He acknowledged it was a nice restaurant, very quaint. But there was a problem. His Uncle Joe thought it was time for Harlem to get with the program. The numbers were Italian business now. Always should have been. Bumpy still didn't look up. But Mamie did. Her gaze at Sal had the kind of frozen contempt that could stop a heartbeat. Sal continued, explaining the deal. Bumpy would step aside, hand over his operation. They'd give him 10%. He could keep his little restaurant, keep playing the big man for his people. But the real money, that stayed where it belonged, with them. The whole restaurant was holding its breath. 40 people frozen in time. Bumpy set down his knife, took his napkin, wiped the corners of his mouth with that same surgical precision he used to cut meat. Then he looked up at Sal for the first time. His eyes were calm. Too calm. That calm that sharks have before they attack. "That's a generous offer," Bumpy said evenly. "But I'm going to have to decline." Sal's smile disappeared. "You're making a mistake. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. This ain't one of them." And then Sal said it. The word. The slur. What you never, under any circumstances, say to a black man in his own establishment, in front of his wife, in front of his people. "Listen," Sal Bonano said. Mamie's fork hit her plate. The sound echoed like a gunshot. The entire restaurant went deathly silent. Not the kind of silence where people pause to listen. The kind where everyone's deciding whether they'll see tomorrow. Bumpy's expression didn't change, didn't flinch, didn't show anger. But everyone in that restaurant who knew him, who understood what Bumpy Johnson was capable of, felt their blood turn to ice. Because Bumpy Johnson, sitting perfectly still, was more dangerous than most men in motion. His right hand moved slowly, reached into his vest pocket. Sal's 6 bodyguards all tensed, hands moving toward weapons. But Bumpy didn't pull a gun. He pulled out his razor, the same straight razor he'd carried since he was 16 years old, the one he'd used to carve his reputation into the flesh of men who underestimated him. He placed it on the table, gently, next to his steak knife. "You brought 6 men," Bumpy said quietly. His voice was so calm it was terrifying. "6 guns into my restaurant and you think that makes you dangerous?" Sal tried to laugh it off. "I think it makes me smart." "No," Bumpy said. "It makes you ignorant." He stood up slowly, folded his napkin with the same precision he used to cut his steak, placed it on the table. The 6 bodyguards all reached for their weapons. Bumpy didn't even glance at them. "You see these people?" Bumpy said, gesturing to the 40 people in the restaurant. "You think they're just customers? Just innocent folks eating dinner?" Sal looked around, slowly. For the first time, uncertainty crept into his eyes. "Let me educate you, Sal. That man by the door, his name is Thomas. I paid his daughter's hospital bills when she got pneumonia. That woman in the red dress, her husband used to beat her. I made sure he stopped. That kid washing dishes in the back, I kept him out of jail when the cops tried to frame him for something he didn't do." Bumpy took a step closer. Sal's bodyguards raised their weapons halfway. Bumpy didn't stop. "Every person in this restaurant owes me something. Not because I demanded it, because I earned it. You brought 6 guns into my house, Sal, but I've got 40 soldiers. They're just not wearing suits." Sal swallowed hard, not obvious. Barely a movement in his throat. But Bumpy saw it. The whole restaurant saw it. For the first time in his professional life, Sal the Butcher Bonano felt uncertainty. He looked around the restaurant, slowly. The faces staring back at him didn't show fear. No downcast eyes, no hunched postures of submission. What he saw was something far more terrifying. Resolve. 40 pairs of eyes waiting for Bumpy's signal, waiting for the word that would turn them from customers into an army. Thomas, the man by the door, 60 years old, hands like shovels from construction work. His 7-year-old daughter got pneumonia last winter. The doctors wanted $300 up front. Thomas didn't have it. Bumpy paid the entire bill, not as a loan, as a gift. The girl lived. Thomas would never forget. The woman in the red dress by the window, Rosalie Williams, 32 years old. Her husband beat her every Friday after cashing his check and spending it on cheap whiskey. One night, the husband ended up in an alley with both legs broken. Nobody ever found out who did it. But after that, every Friday, Bumpy sent someone to check that Rosalie was okay. The husband never raised his hand again. The young man washing dishes in the kitchen. Marcus, 18 years old. The cops arrested him for a robbery he didn't commit. They needed to close the case, needed a black culprit. Marcus was going to spend 20 years in prison. Bumpy hired the best lawyer in Manhattan. The case fell apart in 3 weeks. Marcus walked free. Now he washed dishes at Wells' restaurant and studied at night to become an accountant. Every person in that restaurant had a similar story. And Sal Bonano, with all his experience in violence, with 17 kills on his resume, finally understood something fundamental. He'd brought 6 guns to a fight. But Bumpy had brought something far more lethal: loyalty. "Now," Bumpy said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "I'm going to give you a choice. You can apologize to my wife for using that word in her presence. Then you can walk out of here and tell your Uncle Joe that Harlem is not for sale." He picked up the razor, opened it slowly. The blade caught the light. "Or you can find out why they call this Bumpy's Kingdom." Sal Bonano had killed 17 men in his career. He'd broken bones, burned businesses, extorted millions. He wasn't used to being afraid. But standing there in that restaurant, surrounded by 40 silent witnesses, staring into Bumpy Johnson's cold, calm eyes, Sal Bonano felt something he hadn't felt since he was a child. Terror. Not the kind of terror that comes from physical pain, the kind that comes from realizing you've miscalculated badly and there's no way out. Bumpy smiled. That same smile from earlier. The one that said he already knew how this story ended. Then Bumpy Johnson said 6 words. 6 words that would echo through the criminal underworld for decades. "Your uncle will bury you tomorrow." The words hung in the air like toxic smoke. Sal's face went pale. "What?" "You heard me," Bumpy said calmly. "You walked into my restaurant, disrespected me, disrespected my wife, disrespected my people, and you think you're walking out of here?" Sal's bodyguards raised their guns fully now. All 6 aimed at Bumpy. Bumpy didn't even blink. "You can shoot me," Bumpy said, "and maybe you'll kill me. But the moment you pull those triggers, 40 people in this room will tear you apart. And even if you make it out, even if you somehow fight your way through that door, you think you're making it out of Harlem alive?" This is my city, Sal. Every block, every corner, every alley. You're already dead. You just don't know it yet. The silence was absolute. You could hear the clock on the wall ticking, the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, someone's breath, shallow and quick. Sal's hand was shaking, just barely, but it was shaking. That's when Bumpy gave him the mercy he didn't deserve. Or, Bumpy said softly, you can apologize to my wife, walk out of here, and never come back. Tell your uncle that if he wants Harlem, he can come himself, but he better bring more than 6 men. 10 seconds. Nobody moved. 10 seconds that felt like 10 years. Then Sal Bonano lowered his weapon. His crew looked at him in shock, but Sal wasn't looking at them. He was looking at Mamie. Mrs. Johnson, Sal said, his voice barely audible. I apologize. That word, I shouldn't have said it. Mamie didn't respond, just stared at him with those cold, unforgiving eyes. Sal backed away slowly. His crew followed him, weapons still out, but lowered now. They moved toward the door like men walking away from a bomb they'd accidentally triggered. When Sal reached the door, he turned back one last time. This isn't over, Bumpy. Bumpy sat back down, picked up his fork, cut another piece of steak. Yes, it is, Bumpy said without looking up. You just don't know it yet. Since Sal and his crew left, the door swung shut behind them. For a moment, the restaurant stayed silent. Then someone started clapping. Slow at first, then faster. Then everyone was clapping, standing, cheering. Bumpy Johnson had just stared down 6 armed mobsters without firing a single shot. Mamie reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You didn't have to do that, she said softly. Yes, I did, Bumpy replied. Respect is everything. You lose that, you lose everything. Sal Bonano left Harlem that night. He never came back. 3 days later, the 5 families held an emergency meeting in Manhattan. Joe Bonano wanted revenge. He wanted Harlem. He wanted Bumpy Johnson dead. But Frank Costello, the man who really ran New York's underworld, said something that changed everything. Bumpy Johnson runs Harlem because Harlem wants him to. We try to take it by force. We start a war we can't win. Not because we can't kill him. Because we can't kill 40,000 people who'll die for him. Leave Harlem alone. And they did. From that night forward, the Italian mob never tried to take over Harlem's numbers game again. They made deals. They negotiated. They showed respect. Because Bumpy Johnson taught them something they'd forgotten. Power isn't just about guns and money. It's about loyalty. It's about earning the respect of people who don't have to give it to you. Sal Bonano died in 1952. Heart attack. Some people said it was natural. Others said Bumpy had a long memory. Nobody knows for sure. But here's what we do know. After that night in September 1948, nobody ever disrespected Bumpy Johnson in his own restaurant again. And that razor he put on the table, he never had to use it. Because sometimes the most dangerous weapon a man has isn't made of steel. It's the love of his people.